The rain in Seattle was a relentless companion, a soft, persistent drizzle that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of my existence, echoing the quiet turmoil that had settled in my chest since the betrayal upended my world. It wasn't just Ryan's infidelity with Claire or Marcus's predatory abuse of power at Pinnacle Solutions that left me reeling. It was the way those betrayals forced me to confront the parts of myself I'd long ignored. The Amber who had trusted so readily, who had believed in the inherent goodness of those closest to her, was gone, replaced by someone sharper, more cautious, but also, I was beginning to understand, more resilient. Seattle's gray skies, once a soothing backdrop for my introspections, now mirrored the storm within me. Yet, as weeks turned into months, those same skies began to offer a kind of clarity, a subtle promise that I could rebuild from the ruins of my past. The hotel room I'd retreated to in those first raw days was more than a temporary escape. It was a sterile cocoon, a space where I could breathe without the weight of memories pressing in. The bed was stiff, the decor bland, but it was exactly what I needed, a blank canvas where I could begin to untangle the chaos of my life. I'd sit cross-legged on the mattress, my laptop casting a soft glow in the dim room, my phone a repository of memories I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Scrolling through old photos was like navigating a minefield, each image a painful reminder of what I'd lost. There was Ryan and me at a dive bar, his arm slung casually around my waist, his crooked grin radiating a warmth I'd once believed was mine alone. There was Claire and me at a bookstore, laughing over a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, our heads bent close like sisters. And then the three of us at a music festival, sunburned and carefree, our arms draped around each other as if nothing could break us. Those moments had felt eternal, but now they were lies, each one a sharp cut to my trust. Deleting them was a deliberate act, my thumb moving with cold precision, erasing years of friendship and love in moments. It didn't heal the wound, but it was a declaration. I was done letting their shadows define me. The anger that had sparked that first night wasn't a fleeting flare. It was a fire I could nurture, a source of strength rather than destruction. At Pinnacle Solutions, I'd spent years honing my skills, crafting meticulous strategies, anticipating risks, navigating the treacherous waters of corporate politics. I'd managed multi-million-dollar projects, wrangled difficult stakeholders, and turned chaos into order. Now, I turned those skills inward, crafting a plan not for a client but for myself. Ryan, Claire, and Marcus had each stolen something from me, my trust, my sense of safety, my belief in fairness, but they weren't going to walk away unscathed, pretending their actions were mere missteps. This wasn't about petty revenge, it was about accountability, about rewriting a narrative that had cast me as the fool. Evicting Ryan was the first step, a practical move that felt like severing a tether. Our apartment had been my sanctuary, the one I'd meticulously organized while Ryan floated through, leaving sketchpads and half-empty coffee mugs in his wake. The lease was in my name, a detail I'd never thought would matter until it did. Serving him the eviction notice was a moment I'd rehearsed in the hotel bathroom, standing before the mirror, practicing my resolve until my voice was steady, my gaze unyielding. When I handed him the papers, his face crumpled, his charm faltering as he realized I wasn't bluffing. "Amber, this is our home," he'd said, his voice breaking with that familiar pleading tone that once melted my defenses. But I was done being swayed. "It's my home," I corrected, my words sharp and final. "You made your choice when you chose her." The 20 days of the eviction process tested my patience to its limits. Ryan didn't go quietly. He sent texts that veered from apologies to accusations, left voicemails I deleted without listening, and once showed up at Pinnacle with my favorite coffee. As if a $5 latte could undo his betrayal. I refused to engage. I worked from the hotel or a co-working space downtown, a sleek spot with exposed brick and overpriced cappuccinos, where I could focus without the risk of running into him. When he finally moved out, I walked through the apartment alone, the silence heavy but liberating. His absence was palpable, no more scattered pencils, no more mugs of cold tea. I hired a cleaning crew to scrub every surface, erasing the faint scent of his cologne. The smudges on the fridge door. I kept one thing, a small sketch of the Space Needle from our first date, tucked into a drawer. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder, even the most beautiful moments can hide deceit. Claire's betrayal cut deeper, a wound to the soul rather than the heart. She wasn't just a friend, she was the sister I'd chosen, the one I'd trusted with my deepest fears and dreams. We'd met in a college literature class, bonding over our love for Jane Austen and late-night diner runs. Splitting fries while we planned our futures. She'd been there through my darkest moments, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, when I doubted my career path. Her words, "You're my forever person," had felt like a vow, one I'd believed with every fiber of my being. Now, I saw her for what she was, a performer who'd smiled to my face while stealing pieces of my life. Her blog was her pride, a carefully curated facade of perfection, pastel aesthetics, inspirational quotes, and product placements for mindfulness and self-care. She'd built a small but loyal following, brands sending her free yoga mats and skincare in exchange for her posts about authenticity. It was so Claire, polished, performative, and, as I now knew, built on half-truths. The IRS tip wasn't malicious, it was strategic. I'd seen enough of her financial habits to know she was reckless, claiming personal expenses as business deductions. The Cabo trip she'd called a content creation retreat was a weekend getaway with Ryan, a detail I'd uncovered through a mutual friend's careless comment. Filing the anonymous tip was simple, a form with enough specifics to raise red flags. I didn't need to witness the fallout to know it would hit her hard. Claire's entire identity was tied to her image, and an audit would crack that facade wide open. Marcus was the true Goliath, a man who'd built Pinnacle Solutions into a tech empire through charisma, ambition, and a ruthless streak that left casualties in his wake. His face was everywhere, on industry magazine covers, in keynote speeches. His name a currency in Seattle's startup scene. But the whispers about him had always been there, hushed conversations in the women's restroom, nervous glances from new hires, an unease I'd felt but ignored in my drive to succeed. I'd been naive, too focused on my own ambition to question the system I was part of. Now, I saw Marcus clearly, not just a bad boss, but a predator who wielded power like a weapon. Meeting Sarah was a turning point, a moment that crystallized my resolve. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from Pinnacle's glass towers. A place with mismatched chairs and baristas who didn't care about your title. Sarah was younger, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance as she showed me the texts Marcus had sent her. "It's like he's testing me," she said, her fingers trembling around her mug. "If I push back, I'm afraid he'll ruin my career." I listened, my heart aching for her but also burning with purpose. I told her about the X thread, the anonymous accounts, the stories beginning to surface. "We're not alone," I said, "and we can stop him, but we have to be smart." The research became my obsession, a way to channel my anger into something tangible. Late nights in my hotel room, the laptop's glow my only companion, I combed through X posts, LinkedIn profiles, and old emails, building a timeline of Marcus's behavior. Former employees who responded to my anonymous messages were cautious but willing to share. A marketing coordinator who'd left 2 years ago described a late-night meeting where Marcus had accidentally brushed her thigh. Then laughed when she flinched. A data analyst shared how he'd offered her a promotion in exchange for spending more time together. Their stories matched Sarah's, matched mine, matched the deleted X post I'd screenshotted before it vanished. The email from Marcus was my ace, a seemingly innocuous message that took on new weight in context. I'd saved it in a folder of work correspondence, never imagining it would become evidence. Now, it was a cornerstone of my case, proof that his behavior wasn't a one-off. I cross-referenced it with Sarah's screenshots, which showed a pattern of escalation, casual check-ins turning suggestive, emojis crossing lines. The other women's stories added depth, their anonymity protecting them while their words built a damning narrative. Tech Truth Seeker, my anonymous X account, became my voice. I'd never been a social media person, but I learned fast, posting with precision to avoid being traced. My first post was simple, a blurred screenshot of Marcus's email. Captioned with a reference to unprofessional conduct at Pinnacle. I tagged tech journalists I'd found on X and used hashtags like #TechAccountability to amplify the reach. The response was slow at first, but then it snowballed. Other employees, current and former, added their stories to the thread, some anonymous, others bold enough to use their real names. Sarah posted about her texts, her words careful but powerful. The hashtag Pinnacle Predator trended for 2 days, a digital wildfire that Pinnacle's PR team couldn't extinguish. Their official statement about a respectful workplace was a feeble attempt at damage control, but the internet doesn't forget. Journalists started digging, and Lena, my friend in the industry, was relentless. I fed her everything: screenshots, timelines, anonymized stories. Her exposé, published during Pinnacle's annual gala, was a masterstroke. The room fell silent as phones buzzed, attendees reading her article in real time. Marcus's speech about integrity became a cruel irony, his empire crumbling under the weight of his actions. The fallout was swift and brutal. Pinnacle's board, under pressure from investors and public outrage, forced Marcus out. His resignation was a terse press release, his severance a fraction of what he'd expected. The stock tanked, and the company scrambled to rebuild trust. For Sarah, for me, for the other women, it was a victory, not just personal, but collective. We'd exposed a system that had protected men like Marcus for too long. Ryan and Claire faded into the background of my life. Ryan moved in with his brother, his freelance gigs drying up as his focus waned. Claire's blog lost sponsors as the IRS audit rumors spread, her perfect image tarnished. I didn't follow their lives closely, I didn't need to. The consequences were enough. By January, I'd moved into a new studio apartment, a cozy space with a view of the Puget Sound's restless waters. My new job at a startup felt like a fresh start, led by a woman whose integrity matched her ambition. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and I found myself smiling more, breathing easier. Sarah and I met for coffee occasionally, our conversations lighter now, filled with plans for the future rather than the pain of the past. The scars of betrayal never fully fade, like a faint ache that flares when the rain grows heavy. But they no longer controlled me. I'd learned to trust my own strength, to see through the facades people build, to fight for what's right even when it's hard. Seattle's rain still fell, a steady rhythm that no longer felt like a weight. It was a cleansing, a reminder that even after the worst storms, the world keeps turning, and so do I. I was Amber, flawed, fierce, and ready for whatever came next. No longer the girl who believed in fairy tales, but a woman who knew how to write her own story. The process of rebuilding wasn't just about moving forward, it was about rediscovering who I was without the shadows of Ryan, Claire, or Marcus defining me. The hotel room, with its beige walls and generic art, had been a cocoon, but I couldn't stay there forever. Finding the new apartment was a deliberate act, a step toward claiming a space that was entirely mine. The studio was small, but it had a wide window overlooking the Puget Sound, where I could watch the water shift from slate gray to silver under the changing sky. I furnished it slowly, choosing pieces that felt like me: a sturdy oak desk, a soft green armchair, a shelf for my books. Each item was a small rebellion against the chaos of the past. A way to anchor myself in the present. The new job was a revelation. The startup, led by a woman named Elena, was everything Pinnacle wasn't: collaborative, transparent, driven by a mission to make technology accessible rather than exclusive. Elena was tough but fair, her feedback sharp but constructive. For the first time in years, I felt like my work mattered, not just to the bottom line but to the people we served. I threw myself into projects, designing systems to streamline user experiences. Drawing on the skills I'd honed at Pinnacle but using them for something meaningful. The late nights weren't a burden anymore, they were a choice, a way to rebuild my confidence in my own abilities. Sarah became an unexpected ally, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my fight. Our coffee meetings evolved from tense strategy sessions to moments of genuine connection. She was thriving at her new job, her confidence growing without Marcus's shadow looming over her. We'd laugh about small things: the barista who always got her order wrong. The way Seattle's rain seemed to have a personality of its own. Those moments felt like a gift, a reminder that I could still find joy, still build new bonds. The X thread, Tech Truth Seeker, remained active, a living testament to the power of collective voices. I checked it occasionally, not out of obsession but curiosity, watching as more stories emerge, not just about Pinnacle but other companies where power had been abused. It was a ripple effect, one I'd helped start. Lena's article had sparked a broader conversation, with other journalists picking up the thread, exposing similar patterns across the tech industry. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore, it was about dismantling a culture that had enabled him. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Not for an audience, but for myself. A journal where I could process the anger, the grief, the hope. The words came slowly at first, halting and raw, but they grew steadier with time. I wrote about the rain, how it felt like both a weight and a release. I wrote about Ryan's sketch, tucked away in a drawer, a reminder of lessons learned. I wrote about Claire's blog, how its collapse felt like justice but also a strange kind of sadness for the friend I'd thought she was. I wrote about Marcus, not with hatred but with a clear-eyed understanding of the systems that had propped him up. The city itself became a partner in my healing. I'd walk along the waterfront, the air sharp with salt and damp, letting the rhythm of the waves steady my thoughts. I'd stop at Pike Place Market, not for the crowds but for the small rituals, buying a fresh bouquet of dahlias, sipping coffee from a stall that had been there for decades. These were the threads that wove me back into myself, grounding me in a place that was both familiar and new. The pain of betrayal lingered, a quiet ache that flared in moments of vulnerability, when I heard a song Ryan loved, or saw a woman who looked like Claire from behind. But it no longer ruled me. I'd learned to trust my instincts. To question the stories people tell, to stand up for myself and others. The rain, once a mirror of my sorrow, now felt like a baptism, washing away the past and leaving space for what was to come. I was Amber, not the naive dreamer, not the broken victim, but a woman who'd faced the worst and come out stronger, ready to write the next chapter of her story with her own hand. The journey of reclaiming myself extended beyond the physical spaces I inhabited or the work I did. It was in the small, deliberate choices I made each day, choosing to walk instead of drive, to cook a meal from scratch, to sit in silence with my thoughts rather than fill it with noise. I began to explore parts of Seattle I'd overlooked in my years with Ryan, discovering hidden bookstores in quiet alleys, cafes where poets read their work under dim lights, parks where the city's hum faded into the rustle of leaves. These discoveries were like finding pieces of myself I hadn't known were missing, fragments of a woman who was learning to exist on her own terms. I reconnected with old passions, too. In college, I'd loved photography, capturing moments of beauty in the ordinary, a raindrop on a leaf, a stranger's smile, the way light filtered through a coffee shop window. I dusted off my old camera, a Canon I hadn't touched in years, and started carrying it on my walks. The act of framing a shot, adjusting the focus, felt like a metaphor for my life, finding clarity in the blur, choosing what to keep in the frame and what to let go. The photos weren't perfect, but they were mine, a visual diary of my healing. I also began to volunteer, something I'd always meant to do but never found time for in the chaos of Pinnacle. I joined a local organization that mentored young women in tech, sharing my experiences, not just the successes, but the failures, the betrayals, the lessons. Talking to them, seeing their ambition and uncertainty, reminded me of my younger self. I wanted them to know what I hadn't, that their worth wasn't tied to a job, a relationship, or someone else's approval. It was a way to give back, to turn my pain into something that could help others avoid the same traps. My relationship with Sarah deepened, becoming a friendship rooted in shared strength rather than shared trauma. We'd meet at new spots around the city, a ramen shop in Capitol Hill, a bakery in Fremont, swapping stories about our new lives. She'd started taking coding classes, her confidence blooming as she discovered her own talents. I admired her resilience, the way she refused to let Marcus's actions define her. Our conversations were a balm, a reminder that connection was still possible. Even after betrayal, the Tech Truth Seeker account became less about Marcus and more about a broader mission. I posted less frequently, but when I did, it was to amplify other voices, women in tech, whistleblowers, anyone challenging the status quo. The account had grown beyond me, a platform for change I hadn't anticipated. I was careful to keep my identity separate, but I felt a quiet pride knowing I'd sparked something bigger than myself. Writing remained my anchor, my journal filled with pages of thoughts. Some angry, some hopeful, all honest. I wrote about the way the Puget Sound looked at dawn, its surface a mirror for the sky's shifting moods. I wrote about the Space Needle sketch, how it no longer hurt to look at but served as a reminder of my own strength. I wrote about Claire, not with bitterness but with a kind of detachment, mourning the friend I'd lost while accepting she'd never truly been who I thought. I wrote about Marcus, not as a monster but as a product of a system that rewarded power over integrity. Seattle itself became a canvas for my renewal. I'd wander through Pioneer Square, its cobblestone streets slick with rain, or lose myself in the crowds at Pike Place, where the scent of fresh fish and flowers mingled with the salt air. These rituals, buying a coffee, watching the ferries glide across the Sound, grounded me, reminding me that I was part of something larger, a city that endured its storms and thrived. The pain of betrayal was still there, a quiet ache that surfaced in unexpected moments, a song on the radio. A glimpse of a familiar silhouette. But it no longer held me hostage. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to see through the masks people wear, to fight for what was right even when it was hard. The rain, once a symbol of my sorrow, now felt like a cleansing, washing away the past and making space for the future. I was Amber, not the naive dreamer, not the broken victim, but a woman who'd faced the worst and emerged stronger, ready to write her story with her own hand, one deliberate, fearless word at a time.